So, what happens when a protest for a specific cause gets met by the very people it's claiming to support? Today, we're going to unpack a really tense clash that went down in New York City, and it brings up some huge questions about activism and, who really gets to speak for whom. The source material we're digging into today kicks the whole thing off with that one really sharp question. It sets a pretty confrontational tone from the get-go, and it lets you know that this is way more than just a protest. It's a fundamental clash of worldviews. Let's get right into it. All right, so the scene is set right in the heart of Manhattan, a place that's definitely seen its share of protests. But this one had a very specific focus that was about to become the center of a much, much bigger debate. So what was this all about? The whole point of the demonstration was to protest U.S. actions related to Venezuelan leader Nicolás Maduro. One protester in the video puts it very plainly, saying they were there to stand, quote, unequivocally with the people of Venezuela against U.S. imperialist aggression. Now, the source material we're looking at is very specific about who it says was in this crowd. It mentions the Party for Socialism and Liberation, it points out Soviet and Cuban flags being waved, and it uses the broad term communists to describe the protesters. It also highlights a key speaker, New York Assemblyman Zohran Mamdani, which helps frame the political leanings of the event. But here's where things get really interesting. This protest wasn't just a one-sided event for long. It pretty quickly turned into something a whole lot more complex and confrontational. So what happened next? This slide really gets to the heart of the whole conflict. On one side of a police line, you've got the original protesters with their anti-imperialist chants. And then, on the other side, a group of Venezuelan immigrants shows up, and their message is the exact opposite. They're literally chanting their thanks to the U.S. president for his policies towards Maduro. And for the source we're examining, this moment is everything. The video's narrator makes the case that this clash is powerful, visual proof that the very people the protesters were claiming to support were actually on the complete other side of the issue. Okay, so from there, the source starts to really pick apart the slogans, the specific language being used by the protesters, to try and break down their core arguments. One of the big slogans they point to, seen on protest signs, is "No war for oil." Now, you've probably heard this phrase before in anti-war movements. It basically suggests that a conflict isn't really about politics or human rights, but about controlling a country's oil. The source then offers a pretty detailed takedown of that slogan. First, it argues there wasn't a war, just a quick military operation. Second, it makes a historical claim that the oil was nationalized, or, as the source puts it, stolen by Hugo Chavez from American companies that had built the infrastructure in the first place. And the argument concludes that actually, U.S. control would be good for both economies. And to really hammer that point home, the narrator in the video says this directly. It's a really bold claim of ownership that's meant to completely flip the "No war for oil" slogan on its head. All right, so after talking about the message, the analysis pivots to the messengers. It starts raising some big questions about who exactly organized and paid for this whole demonstration. The video points a finger at one specific non-governmental organization, or NGO. It claims an outfit called the People's Forum was the primary organizer behind the whole pro-Maduro protest. And then, it drops this huge number, $20 million. According to the source, that's how much funding this particular NGO allegedly received. So the big question is, where did that $20 million come from? Well, the source alleges that the money trail leads all the way back to a billionaire in Shanghai who supposedly has close ties to the Chinese Communist Party, which of course suggests the possibility of foreign influence behind the protest. So, what's the big picture here? What does it all mean? According to this analysis, this clash on a street corner is actually a symptom of a much larger ideological problem. The main takeaway, the big conclusion the source draws from all this, is that this event is more than just a disagreement. It's presented as a visual of what the narrator calls the left-wing coalition collapsing in on itself. A moment where groups that are supposed to be allies find themselves on opposite sides of the barricade. And to really dig into what it sees as this massive contradiction, the narrator poses this pretty pointed question. Basically, if the simple story is oppressed people versus colonizers, why, in this case, are the Venezuelan immigrants siding with the U.S. government? And that really brings us to the final, fascinating question this whole thing leaves us with. A question that goes way beyond just one day in Times Square. When activists and the very communities they say they're fighting for end up on opposite sides, Who actually gets to define the cause?